Okay, and we are doing another update, and we are doing it in one take, for sure, this time. Okay, so the main thing I've added since last time, I think it's been about a month and a half, has been AI. So the AI for the player character has been updated. I had a little bit of AI going in the kind of previous like prototype. That was very simple, and most of that, a lot of that work has carried over. Before I had a concept of a collision trigger that you walk into like activate the AI shooting at you, and I also had this spline, which you see I still have, um, and that is like the path that the AI, that the enemy will walk across as you like before you trigger it. Only now, if you look at the character itself, and we can open up this. These things are now actually actor components. They're not just random objects in the world. They are still objects in the world that are separate. Like if you click on this, like it's not being created by the character, but like this is still just an enemy trigger. This is still just a trigger box, like any other. But I have assigned it to, let's see, volume trigger. Yeah, it is assigned to this public member. Let's see if I can. What's that thing called? Volume trigger. It's not much to it. Well, that's because it's not. Edit BP volume trigger. So this is an actor component. It doesn't do much. We bind this on actor overlap to this trigger, not to the enemy, but to the trigger. And then when you overlap, it sets trigger entered, and you can send that message to the because it is a component of the character. It can look for this, can pull for this trigger entered because it's its own component. If you go to find references, there is none. What happened? Maybe the event is registered elsewhere. Anyways, oh, it's probably in the no, I'm sorry. It's in the behavior. Um, check if target hit decorator. Cast a BP character, get component by class, trigger entered. It's this. So that's the other big thing that changed is there's a lot of this now. It used to be kind of this little section. This section checks if the AI has entered or if the character has entered the trigger. If it hasn't, it does this find next spline location and then moves to it. And then if this check if target hit decorator fails, we go into basically the action of the character. Now, to get myself a little farther in doing AI in Unity, I looked at a video series that Epic had put up called like Building Player Ready AI. It was a really long video series, and I watched like the first half of it and kind of got what I need to get out of it. But that led to me basically making this service. And this service, this ticks every 2 to 5 seconds and figures out, basically, I have it so originally what the thing did is it would do this and you'd enter and then it would do what is basically this, and this chunk basically it finds the location of the player currently. It what it would do is it would just turn towards the player, do the fire gun, which would shoot the projectile out of the gun, which was this. This task is literally taken straight out of that original prototype. I have a fire gun, which is firing, cast to the blueprint, which is the enemy, the gun that they're holding. So you can get the muzzle point, and then spawn the projectile, play the montage, the little animation, and it's all great. The other thing was, yeah, you do that, and then you would wait, and then you just kind of do it in a cycle, and that would be the only thing the enemy did. It would stand still and shoot at you. Now what it does is there is a check for should move service. This is a service that runs every 2 to 5 seconds, and basically it will randomly determine that actually instead of just standing here and shooting, I am going to, let's move this up. Let's make it a little clearer. This is a random integer in range. This picks up through one of three options. One is finding a location behind the player, one is finding a location to the left, and one is to the right. Now that is, by left, right, and back, it is, we're doing some vector math here to determine relative to the player, like what would the enemy moving left look like, what doing moving right would look like. And we do that, I think this is a cross product. Yeah, this is a cross product. We just cross with positive z, and that gets us that, that kind of that right angle, that kind of tangent, sort of right angle, not technically a tangent. And then we multiply that by some random int in some range. It is, if you are doing the cross product, which would mean you're moving left or right, it is negative 500 or 500. If you are just moving straight up and down, it is negative 200 or 200. And you set the next location, and then you set this Boolean Blackboard key selector value, which then gets read by which is do random movement is not set. So because that is not set, we go to this piece, and this piece is do random movement is set. So then it finds that random place that you want to go to, moves to it, and then it sets this back to false. So it doesn't just keep doing it over and over and over again. And then the clever bit, and I'll show you it playing. One of the problems we had before was if the player got in front of a thing, it would kind of the AI would just keep shooting at the wall. Now what we do is we do a little bit of logic to test if the enemy has a clear shot, and if they don't, we actually find a new place for it to stand. And I will get into that. I'll briefly go over the logic there. Get new location from player. What it does is it determines it does 2 raycasts, and I will. Well, no. I'm sorry. The check does 1 raycast. The check is 1 raycast. The check checks from the enemy location to the player location. It does a raycast as far as it can, and if it is either too far away, some number of units I've set, which I believe is 1,000 units. If it is more than 1,000 units away, or it just gets blocked, that's when we determine that the shot can't be made by the AI. And so we go to the so that test sets is shot is not blocked is not set. So that would be is shot blocked is now set to true. Because this condition, this distance was false, as well as. So what was the other thing? Yeah, it determines that the hit actor. It determines that the hit actor is not the same as the player, and so it tells us that is false. The other way it can set, it'll also just do the distance between the two, because you can just take the. Yeah, I don't raycast for the actor for the locations, but yeah, you do your little you do that test, and then you find a new place by getting location from player. What that does is it actually raycasts the other way. It raycasts from the player to the it raycasts from the player to the enemy, and then wherever it stops, either within some number of units. Again, there's a minimum distance. It either will get that distance and across that vector and stop there and say that's the new place, or if it hits before that, it'll say that is the new place. So that's what this break result location set Blackboard values is basically. Here it can set either this distance based on the player location minus the difference between the two normalized. It determines that it is it determines that it is that distance across, so it sets that. Or if it just hits before then, we set it based on the location of which it hit. And so that gives us a new location for the enemy to stand, and that means it will. So if I just back all the way up, it'll also just kind of chase me. which means you can kind of kite the enemy around, but for what we're doing, I think that's just fine. And then that's being all the AI. The last thing I did was, well, I made some adjustments to the, obviously I put some animation in there. All this animation comes from the Unreal Animation Starter Pack. That's an asset you can get for free on the store. And then one of the last things I did was actually get a particle effect in. So if I shoot, let's see if I can kind of see a little blood thing come up out of him, and then he eventually dies. There are 3 death animations it can play through. Let's see if I can get another one to play. Because those also come in that animation starter pack, and I just have it cycle between the 3. And that's about it. If you start doing something like this, like it seems very simple from here. If you start to do this kind of thing and just make sure it has the same, you know, now you've got these 2 guys kind of walking back and forth. And now you have 2 like enemies dynamically kind of shooting at the player. And you know, this is kind of game AI like. And so I think for now, for what I'm trying to do, this is gonna have to settle. Like this is gonna be a good place for me to start moving on with the project. The next thing I'm gonna work on is doing I want to make spawning the AI, because right now they're just kind of placed in here and they just kind of sit, and that's not exactly what I want. I want to be able to have them, I want to be able to walk into a trigger similar to this, but instead of activating the AI, I wanted to actually spawn the AI and the trigger volumes and all this stuff, because I don't want all of these enemies just kind of stuck in the area, like stuck in the map when the map loads. And then from there, I'll be able to build an environment, and that'll kind of start to look more like a game. But until then, that's as far as I am. We've got some gameplay, we've got some guys shooting. If there's still, like, it's not perfect, but it is pretty good for what we're going for. Once I get farther into the whole spawning thing, I will probably make another update video, or maybe I might, see, it's been like a month and a half, I might make a update video more on a monthly basis. We'll see how I feel. Alright, and that is it.